I have bought 43 indie decks in 2025, and these are my top 5. Hello everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. Today, this video is brought to you by popular request because I've received a lot of requests to show my favorite indie decks from 2025. And so what this is all about is the fact that I have bought 43 indie decks in 2025, and these are my top 5. So the first 4 that I'm going to show you are in no particular order. However, number 1 is definitely my number 1. And I realize that I've talked about a couple of these practically all the time. And so you'll probably think that one of those 2 is my number 1. But I realized that actually my number 1 is a tarot deck that I haven't talked about a lot, apart from the moment in which I received it and I filmed my first impression. And so whilst I was going through all of the decks that I bought, which is an exercise that, let me tell you, not easy, because even though I do keep a purchasing log, I only update it with a new deck after I'm sure 100% that I'm going to keep that one. And so sometimes, depending on my schedule, it might take up to 2 months. And as you can imagine, in 2 months, I probably received or I bought another couple of decks. And so I'm in constant backlog. And sometimes whatever I mark up as received, say in February, it's probably more likely to have come into my collection in December. And that means that now that we're in January, there's probably a couple of decks that I've acquired in December that I haven't marked down yet. But in any case, it's easier to ascertain than the mass market decks because in that case, because they're cheaper, I do tend to buy them almost sight unseen, and then I would just try them out, and it is more likely to result in me rehoming them eventually because I'm not entirely sure I want to keep them. For the indie decks, it's definitely not the case. I do ask myself several times whether I really want to buy that deck, why I want to buy it, what do I think I'm going to use it for, what part of my collection is going to fill, do I have another deck that is similar to that, is this a deck that I think is going to go mass market on the one hand, but out of print on the other. Mass market because I think I might just wait for that to come up mass market. And let's say that if I have an idea that an indie deck might go out of print and become a collectible item, I feel more incentivized to buy it. So there's a number of reasons or a number of motivations behind my buying habits when it comes to especially indie decks. But the choice that I made today is about what these decks feel to me, what they make me feel, the way in which I approach them, the way in which I relate to them, and the way in which they bring something new to my collection, but also to myself, to my practice. So without much further ado, let me just say, as I said earlier, not particular order for the first 4. Number 1 is number 1, and it's not what you think. It's not what you think. It is a deck that, as I said, I don't talk about often, but it's number 1 for a number of reasons that I will tell you. So let's start with my, not number 1, but one of the top 5. And let me tell you, top 5 out of 43 is a really good effort, I would say. And this is the revised edition of the Somnia Tarot by Nicolas Bruno. I remember the other day I was filming a video about recommendations that I was asking you guys for my birthday, because I want to build a new wish list for my birthday, because I just realized that the one that is already existing is about decks that will be published after my birthday. And since I really want something to be there for my birthday, I want to be able to open, the present, etc. I was asking for recommendation. I was dividing all of my favorite decks to use into 10 different categories. And then I was explaining why I wanted a recommendation on that specific category and what kind of vibes that was. And so I was talking about photographic decks, and I was talking about Somnia Oracle, because I just didn't want to always show the tarot deck. I love both. I would say these decks are simply amazing. The level of mastery of photography that Nicolas Bruno is showing in this work is nothing short of incredible. I have been working in photography for many, many years of my life as a photographer myself, and then as a documentary producer on photography in Australia for Channel 10. And I have to say, thanks to that, I got to travel the whole country and meet with hundreds of photographers. And I got to know really well what's driving the industry, the motivations behind people's work of art. I got to talk to photographers that were specializing in fine art photography. I got to talk to documentary photography photographers. I got to talk to Jason Edwards. Actually, Jason Edwards was one of the hosts of the show. So I was working day to day with Jason and, traveling with Jason. If you don't know him, he is a fantastic photographer for National Geographic, and he's also in many National Geographic shows. He's one of 50 top 50 photographers in the world, according to National Geographic's ranking. And Jason is Australian, he's from Melbourne. And so he was the co-host of the show. I wasn't in the show. I was a producer, one of the producers. And so obviously I was, it was amazing to collaborate with him because he's got a very strong personality. And I tend to relate better with someone that I can actually tease sometimes. So it was really, really so much fun. And I can assure you that after I developed that skills to recognize good photography for so many years, I can definitely say that this type of photography is exceptionally good. It is not easy. Um, as a photographer myself, I can tell you that finding the right lighting, finding the right moment of the day to shoot this. Obviously, this is not a studio work. This has been all of these have been, well, probably some of these photos have been shot inside, indoors in a studio. But all you can see here is definitely from outdoors. And so it takes a lot of knowledge of the art of photography, especially lighting exposure, but also color correction and a lot of other things that I'm not going to go too deep into details because it's just going to be boring. However, I always like to finish with this card because it's a star card. And obviously, as you guys know, this is in general my favorite card of a tarot deck, in the sense of the meaning of the star card is my favorite card. But in this deck, it's also my favorite card of the whole deck, in specific this star card, because it's just so incredibly beautiful. You can tell it's almost as if it was a 9 of Wands with a happy ending. And by happy ending, I obviously mean something charged up with hope and renewal and guidance and reconnection and meaningful relationship. So it feels like there's been a considerable effort to get to the top of this hill, because everything is snowed in and there's ice as well, so it's difficult to climb. And one you get to the top, you look at the horizon. So it's a 9 of Wands slash 3 of Wands with the star, infused with the star's hope. And I just really love this. I love the crepuscular kind of light. I love the idea that I can already see some of the stars in the background there. But I love the idea that the light is still guiding me. So it's not. See, I also love, for example, the star card from the Slow Tarot. I always talk about that card. The star card is my favorite star card of all time. And I stick to my gun. I will say, yes, I do prefer that one. But when it comes to photography, this is exceptional. What has been achieved here is truly exceptional. So this is a gorgeous indie deck. I believe it's still available because there was a Kickstarter campaign which I backed, and then they started producing and sending the decks out. But I believe they might still be available on Nicholas Bruno's website. In any case, really, really fantastic. And since I realize that there's a couple of indie decks I tend to talk about all the time, I'm just going to go ahead and show them to you because, as I said, number one, it's not what you think. So I know that a lot of people would have thought that number one was manga, the manga tarot, because I do tend to talk about this a lot. But the reasons why I do that is because I use it a lot. And so when I use a deck over and over again, I tend to talk about it simply because I have just done something with that deck and I want to share my opinion of the deck with you guys. And because it's in my top 5, of course I love it. Of course it's here for a reason. However, it's not number one. And I was really shocked when I decided which one was going to be number one. I kind of did a double take and I went, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." Okay, so, stay tuned, we'll see. So this is, well, what it says, the title, a manga tarot. So the structure of a manga, although you can't really see from this card, so let me just show you another card that will be easier to make the association. If you ever read a manga, so manga is a magazine, but in Japanese, they tend to take foreign language words and apply them to objects that they don't really have a native word for, and then truncate them, so reduce them in shorter words. And it has become iconic, I believe, because if I know for a fact that if I talk about manga to someone in Europe, they will know what it is, in America, in South America, in Australia. So it has become something iconic, something popular for many decades. And then the correspondent in on a TV format is called anime, from short from animation, and it's the same concept. So these are comic books basically, and the graphic design, the style that you can see here is my favorite. I always say, well, this one is also laid out in such a way that it suggests the page of a comic book, as you can see. So you read it this way. There is a directionality in the vignettes, which I find completely revolutionary as a concept, and I really love it. And I will have to admit that sometimes when I talk about this deck with someone who's not really into manga or comic books, they're not necessarily understanding the order in which to read the vignettes. And I get it, because if you're not reading comic books, sometimes you will start thinking, do I go here first? Do I go there first? Etc. So you're kind of second guessing yourself. However, once you start working with this deck, you will notice that this is actually coming more and more natural to you, or at least I really hope that you do, because I know that every time I show this deck, there's a lot of you saying, I just bought it because I saw it on your channel, which makes me really happy. But I also hope that obviously you will enjoy it as much as I do. I really love this so, so much. So as I was saying, there's two styles. What I recognize there to be two style, it's absolutely not. You will never find this definition on Google, and no one has actually theorized this. It's just me. It's just that as someone who's been consuming manga and anime all my life, literally, because in Italy, we love Japan. We really do. Everything Japanese for us is to die for. And what happened was that when I was little, there were a lot of Japanese anime that were imported into Italy and then released, um, well, pretty much at all hours. You could switch on the TV, go into one special channel, and you would see anime 24/7 or close to 24/7. And I remember back then, I was just watching hours and hours and hours of anime, and I loved them so, so much. And this was the style that I call pre Sailor Moon. So before Sailor Moon was released, or at least released in Italy, I obviously my knowledge is in a timeline, determined by the Italian broadcasting services. I did not have access to Japanese anime, so obviously maybe Sailor Moon was released already in the 70s or the 80s. I have no idea, but it came to Italy, I believe, in the mid to late 80s. So I wasn't necessarily watching anime anymore. I was more like reading manga. But in any case, maybe that's the reason why I prefer the pre-Sailor Moon style. In any case, I do feel like once we got Sailor Moon, every single manga looked like characters from Sailor Moon. So, the same type of hair, the same type of clothes, the same type of makeup, but also, the really big eyes and the triangular mouth and so on. There were some characteristics that were quite recognizable when you were paying attention to it. This one, though, is not like that. And I actually really like it because of that reason, because I'm not particularly a fan of the post Sailor Moon and of Sailor Moon herself, to be honest. It was a novelty when I watched it for the first time. So, of course, I kind of enjoyed it. But because after Sailor Moon, there were so many anime that was so similar to it, I thought that it had kind of lost the novelty. And I just really prefer my Lupin the Third, for example. I know that some of you used to watch it as well. So how good was that? I just love it so, so much. Fujiko, Margot, obviously in the third or fourth season. Jigen was my favorite from Lupin the Third. I had a huge crush on Jigen. I know. In any case, this is a fantastic deck. It is still available, I believe, whether it's on Tevada or Vermilio Connection or maybe Nana Taro. I'm not entirely sure, but this is an amazing deck. It's an indie deck and definitely part of my top 5 indie decks that I've acquired in 2025. So another one of my top 5 indie decks acquired in 2025 is not a deck from 2025. But it has to be on the list because it's one of my unicorn decks. So when I went to London to the College of Psychic Studies to present the Discombobulators, so Andrea Asse's magazine where I write, I was very lucky because I went to Treadwell bookstore, and even though my experience there started not with the best foot because they absolutely categorically denied me filming, which would have been really awesome because they have some amazing decks. As soon as I got in, the first thing I saw was this deck, the Delta Enduring Tarot. It was inside a cabinet, and I had to ask to see it. And this is one, it was actually my number 1 unicorn deck on my wish list. I found it and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't even, as I often say when talking about this deck, the price tag was in British pound, obviously, being in London. And normally I would have converted that in my head. I literally told my head to shush. I told my brain to shush and not do the conversion and just go for it. And just, I literally went through all of the cards because it wasn't in order. So I had to check that all of them were there. And once I was sure that it was complete, I just I gave them my credit card. I was like, don't even show me. Don't even show, just go, just take my money, and, let me go. And I'm very happy that I did because, oh my God, apart from the fact that, excuse me, look at this card. I mean, hello. It's a gorgeous deck. I love it. It's a modern deck. It's one of my favorites. And you guys know how much I love these kind of decks. The ones that I call the modern RWS, which are not necessarily an RWS clone, but they do show you the same RWS system in the cards, but with modern examples. So the Ace of Oysters, I love it because there's not just the idea of this fluidity, the water, because obviously oysters, you find them in the sea. So there's this wave of the sea that is opening up like a flower, and the fruit of it is the oyster, which ironically looks like a cup. So there are elements of the Ace of Cup on the card, and it's done in a really, really good way. But at the same time, what I love is that the hand that is traditionally holding, it's actually holding a slice of lemon and it's squeezing it. So you can actually see the droplets of lemon juice that are going to be on the oyster. And I just love that concept. I love the fact that it's so smart that it's almost winking at me. It's almost as if it were engaging me already, but in not too a direct way, in such a way that I can choose whether to be engaged or not. There are cards that are very engaging, but also a bit confronting. This deck is engaging, but it's not confronting. It's engaging, but it's doing its own thing. And it's saying, listen, this is who I am. This is what I do. You can like it or not. I don't necessarily care. And you can react to what you see on the cards or in any way you will, but at the same time just know that I'm here and I'm doing my thing, and this is a tarot deck, and of course you can use me. Oh, look at this, love it. It's just the idea of having the possibility to relate to the cards in mnemonic way. Is that correct? So related to memories, mnemonic. And in any case, the idea that you can see one of your own memories reflected on the cards is just so beautiful. I love it. I really do. Look at the Mardi Gras, of course. I was lucky enough to be in New Orleans, not during Mardi Gras, unfortunately. I would have loved that. But there was a funeral whilst I was literally the day in which I was in the French Quarter. And I really appreciated the opportunity to witness this traditional New Orleans funeral with the jazz band marching and everyone dancing and wearing really gorgeous costumes and hats and even wigs and stuff. And it was an actual funeral, so there was an actual coffin, someone had actually died. But because there was this really strong sense of celebration of the life that this person has had, it didn't feel sad, and I found myself wishing, and I know that it's culturally speaking, it would not be appropriate for me because when you go to funerals in Italy, they're actually kind of sad, even though it is a reason for the family to be acknowledging all the meaningful connections. So you invite a lot of people to the funerals because you not only want to be supported, but you also want to recognize that this person meant a lot for a lot of people. So I will tell you this, sometimes you invite more people to funerals than you do to weddings in Italy. And it's amazing because there is the possibility for each and every one of the guests to express how important the life of the person who's no longer there was for them. So, but I was thinking by watching this really gorgeous funeral in New Orleans, I was finding myself kind of, thinking that I would have, I don't know, I would love my own funeral to be like that. And, but I know that it's not possible, but it's really, really, really cool. So this deck, really gorgeous. I would have to say I have tried and use it for a reading a couple of times. Novice books. I love this. I love this. Of course, you dum dum. I love this. So I try using it in readings a couple of times. I still have to go back to guidebooks, which is completely fine because I'm learning so much about this deck. But I don't feel like I can use it for clients' readings yet because I'm not entirely familiar with it. This is the Delta. Obviously, sorry, I just assume that everyone knows about this deck. So this is the Delta and Durian Tarot. So it's the Delta of the Mississippi, and obviously it talks about the stories of people living in the Delta. And it's a deck that was realized as a word for a Kickstarter campaign back in 2017, I believe. Yes, by Egan. Yeah. Stealth Enduring Tarot Southern Cartomancy, a tarot deck dedicated to the natural beauty and struggles of the Mississippi Delta and the southern lives that thrive there despite the storm always on the horizon. This is such a lovely way to address a the deck. I think that it's part of the reasons why I love it so much. Okay, there's another one, and that is number one. So this deck is not from 2024, 2025, sorry. However, I did acquire it in 2025, and it's an indie deck. So this is the Unfinished Business, a Ghostly Tarot by MJ Cullinane. When it comes to MJ, to be honest, guys, I never know because I tend not to buy her decks when they're indie. And there's a reason. And please forgive me, but it's just that I tend to find the cardstock that she chooses to be a little bit too slippery for my taste. I love it when a deck fans out like a charm, and it is obviously much easier to overhand shuffle when the cards are kind of slippery. But for example, I used to have the Forhaxa as an indie deck, and I just couldn't use it. And when it goes mass market, I love it. I love what Hay House is doing to MJ's decks. They're very respectful when it comes to the layout and everything. I think that now they've developed a symbiotic relationship, and obviously MJ, I'm imagining, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm imagining MJ to be kind of coordinating the production when it goes mass market, because the result is stunning. And the Forhaxa, I had to rehire my indie deck, and I was more than happy to get the mass market one. I would have to say, though, that you never know which ones of MJ's decks are going to be picked up mass market. I really thought that the Unfinished Business was so popular when it came out indie, that everyone wanted a copy. And I thought to myself, probably Hay House has noticed that as well, and they're going to tell MJ that they want to pick it up. But it hasn't happened yet. So it's an indie deck. I finally decided to go for the indie deck. I'm kind of happy because I don't know whether I would have been able to read all of the stories here that we have in the indies edition of the book. And let me tell you, the book is just as important as the tarot in this case. The book reads really well. All of these stories, it does remind me a lot. I've said that a couple of times, that it reminds me a lot of the anthology of Spoon River. Now, you need to understand that Spoon River was revolutionary for me. I read it for English lit and language. So I wasn't studying English at school, English literature at school, until I started my high school, because, well, in Italy, you don't study literature of a foreign language. However, in my school, it was kind of not experimental, it wasn't an experimental school, but I remember I had a fantastic professor, and he was an Anglophile. He lived in London for so many years, and he really loved every kind of output, whether it was artistic or out of literature or movies or TV shows or songs. He really had a fixation for songs, for example. It was awesome because we were learning the language through listening to songs. Isn't that amazing? And so I remember that it was like, okay, guys, there's something that I wanted to talk to you about. There's this anthology. It's called Anthology of Spoon River. And he started describing it, and everyone went like this. And we really said, yes, absolutely, let's study that. And it was eye opening the way in which I could finally read it in the original language and understand the subtleties of the message behind those really cryptic, very short messages on the tombstones. That was an eye opener for me. It told me that I didn't necessarily have to stop at one language to appreciate the intention of an author behind what they were writing. And there was so much passion, pathos. There was so much sadness, and in many, many cases, so much rage. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I was reading it on my own time because I wanted to see whether I was able to understand this foreign language to me, this language that was completely foreign to me, in a way good enough that was giving me the chills when I was finally understanding what the story was about. So that still stays in my heart, and one of the most amazing experiences in enjoying something in a foreign language. And so when I looked at this deck, I knew that there would have been something kind of similar. And when I started reading this book, oh my God, actually, the King of Cups, Jacob Birch, is one of my favorites. So it talks about this captain, is a sea captain, very well loved by his crew, also because he was able to smoothen out all of the conflicts when you're at sea, especially for a long period of times. People start to turn on each other. So it was always the pacifier. And he really tells your story, but not, maybe it's a couple of paragraphs, not longer than that, but it does paint a picture of this man that was a good man. And then, it says, oh, yeah, and also he had a life at home and he had a wife, Eunice, yeah. And then you start reading about their life, and Eunice has been very supportive and good, good, good. And you go, oh, yeah, an amazing story, fantastic to hear about these two. And of course, yeah, the King of Cups. And then you read, but yet, beneath the loving exterior, Eunice harbored growing feelings of jealousy and possessiveness. As Jacob's sea voyages lengthened, these feelings intensified, leading her down a dark path. Subtly, she began to tamper with the food she lovingly prepared for his trips. And you start thinking, oh my God, did she poison him? So there's so much engagement here, and I'm not going to spoil it because, I don't want to spoil the end. But it's really interesting. It shows you a snapshot of the lives of people, and at the same time, it also tells you why they are seen under this specific light. Why is Jacob the King of Cups? What his life was about, and how you should relate to it. And then obviously look at the cards. So this is one of those decks that, generally speaking, I would recommend, even if you don't like the art style. Although, let me just tell you, I'm not entirely sure that this one is still in print or still in stock. And with MJ, honestly, I love her, but you never know. Sometimes it's like, MJ, are you going to reprint that or not? Yeah, well, yeah, maybe, possibly, no. And then she reprints it. So I have no idea if it's out of stock. She may be reprinting it. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Whatever I do know is that when she's being vague about something, it's because it has been finally being picked up mass market, but she can't release it. She can't, let's say, tell the news yet, because Hay House has not released the news yet. So maybe we can still hope. So, but I would definitely recommend this deck if it does come out mass market, because of the book, even if you don't like the images. I like the images as well. And I keep it in order because otherwise it would be too difficult to just find the cards that I want to find. It is so beautiful. it's also very beautiful. So it's not just a matter of learning about the stories behind these ghosts. So obviously these are ghosts because you can tell because, you know, they're transparent. And unfinished business is what is generally thought to be a reason for the existence of a ghost. So whenever a person passes away, they remain in this realm for a while because they have unfinished business. They're not at peace and they cannot move on. And I love just reading about them. It's really, truly amazing. I love this deck so, so much. I don't use it for divination. I don't think that it will make sense, at least not the way I read. I don't necessarily use it yet in my practice because I would definitely use like feeling it during the month of October and November as well. But in that case, it would be to try and understand whether someone needs to be released. You know what I mean? So I'm not entirely sure. But I also know that it's a fantastic deck. The effort behind the writing on the guidebook is tangible and the effects are amazing. Look at the Ten of Cups. It's just so beautiful. Beautiful cards, beautiful art style, beautiful colors, amazing writing, amazing entries in the guidebook. As I said, so I'm not entirely sure, but I think that it may have been reprinted as indie once, and maybe there's still a little bit of stock left, so it is worth checking it out. However, it might also be difficult to find now. I'm sorry, I just don't entirely know. These are the backs. So really amazing, amazing, super duper amazing deck. And the number one indie deck that I've acquired in 2025 is the Crack Hammeist Tarot by Jessica Bott. Yes, I love this deck so much. This is one of the decks that really puts together so many of my favorite elements in an indie deck. And it's just, I hate to say it's the gift I keep on giving, but actually it is. There's no other better expression to say something about this deck. So I love everything about this. This was a Kickstarter campaign, and I honestly don't know whether it's still in stock or not. This is the website in any case, just if you want to check it out. And I would say also, Jessica, during this campaign, she made available a couple of her older decks that people really wanted. That had gone out of print, etc. So maybe there's also prints of those decks still available, but I'm not entirely sure. I love everything about it because it's a wraparound magnetic box, which are my favorite. And also when it comes to these kind of boxes, I love the fact that it's big enough to give you the possibility to store the guidebook as well. And then the cards. But let's talk about the rose petal of the cardstock used for the guidebook and also for the box. They're actually really nice and smoother than what I'm used to. So I'm thinking, are we going towards a version 3.0 of the rose petal cardstock? Because I remember I don't know if you guys remember the very first very famous indie deck that came out with a rose petal type of cardstock was the Healing Waves Tarot, and it was almost impossible to use because that type of rose petal made it so that the cards were sticking one to the other, and it was really impossible to overhand shuffle, and fanning the deck out it just felt very awkward. And then they moved to a smoother version, and now it feels that this one, which is one of the most recent ones that I've got, feels even smoother. So maybe we're going towards this kind of evolution to making the card still feel very soft and velvety to the touch, but at the same time, you can still fan them out. I would say though that this has got an even more papery feel. It's still, I don't know whether I can still classify this as rose petal because it's still very velvety, but it's at the same time, it feels papery as well. Maybe that is the evolution, and it's just amazing. Look at this, fantastic. See? If you know your rose petal and the various versions of it, you will know that this will be impossible to achieve unless you work with the deck like a million times. And then, you know, by sheer friction, at the end of the day, you will get some kind of sliding, but it's, you know, it's not something that you might want to have to do. So this one is, this is an amazing deck, as I was saying. I love everything about it. It's, so the product quality, product value is amazing. The campaign was very smooth, which let me tell you, I unfortunately I backed a campaign and the artist behind the campaign has completely disappeared. The last this is from a year and a half ago, and the last update was from October, and she hadn't even completed everything, so there was still a few entries to be completed on the guidebook. I don't know about the cards. And it wasn't even my intention to back that Kickstarter campaign. It was a friend of mine who convinced me to. And I feel like now every time we talk about it, she feels sheepish because she knows that she convinced me to back this campaign, and we all feel like we're being ripped off. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. Maybe, you know, there's obviously we never know what other people are going through, and there might be reasons behind these silences, but it's just so incredibly frustrating. And it's not even about the money, it's about the fact that we were really excited about receiving a deck, and we just probably have to admit that we'll never see it. But it's fine. But that experience going through that actually makes you appreciate even more when a campaign goes smoothly, because it's like, oh, thank goodness, you know, it's not a given, it's not granted. So the guidebook is really cool, and if you're not familiar with it, let me just show you because it's really mind-blowing. See what I mean? It's visual. See? It's visual. I think it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant because it's very elemental, and it makes it easier somehow to memorize the meaning of the cards, I believe. Obviously, it depends on the way in which your brain processes information. If you're not a visual person, then this one might not be helpful. But I am a visual person, and this is extremely helpful for me. I really love what Jessica has done here. It's really amazing. And I'm thinking also it might have been slightly more expensive to print because it's basically images. But in any case, it was just, you know, an afterthought. I honestly have no idea. I never realized a Kickstarter campaign. I never made a deck. But this is, yeah, the whole guidebook is like this, which is really mind-blowing. I've honestly never seen anything like it. I've seen guidebooks that were minimal in terms of explanations, and I've seen guidebooks that were talking for pages and pages and pages about one card. But this one at the same time has got only one page and literally not more than 3 keywords, like the 7 of arrows in this case is threat, defense, and opposition. But then this is brilliant. You know, it shows you the way, it's almost as if you were looking at a blueprint for a war action or a maneuver. You know what I mean? Like the offense is coming this way, so you have the arrows coming this way. And they tell you, yeah, you can present a compact wall for the defense, but you may also have to escalate or scale, or I don't know how to explain this way in order to cover more room. And so it makes you think, because the 7 of arrows, so the suit of arrows is actually the renaming for the suit of wands, which I admit is not necessarily, so sometimes we see arrows used as the suit of swords because they're pointy, but arrows in this case, it looks more to the fact that they have the element of wood in them, but in any case, it is the suit of wands or the suit of fire. So the 7 of arrows is the 7 of fire, and it talks about the way in which you need to stand up for what you believe in, but it also in a sequential way, which is sequential method is actually what we're going to study this year with my members. because I am a strong believer in reading with the sequential method. The sequential method would also give you the possibility to, A, not having to memorize everything, because you deduce your way through the cards. And also B, it gives you the best way or the best tool of knowledge to learn how to read reversals and remember them. In any case, when we read in a sequential method, the Seven of Arrows is what happens after you do not acknowledge the help of your team in the Six of Arrows, or the Six of Wands, anyway, the Six of Fire. So in the Six of Fire, you are presented as a crown winner, and you're on your horse, and everyone is throwing flowers at you, and you're so happy because you finally won something and you were the leader. Unfortunately, you forget to acknowledge that without the help of your team, you wouldn't have been winning anything. And so when that happens, you forget to acknowledge the Six of Wands, you forget the help of others, and you are just so inebriated and drunk on your own power. You get to the position in which your team is turning against you in the Seven of Arrows. And it's a bit of a surprise for you, but you need to stand your ground. So this way, it does suggest a little bit of a military kind of intelligence, and I really like it because next time I will picture this in my head and I will know how to read the Seven of Wands or Seven of Fire. So really, really amazing book. It's one of the reasons why I think this is my number one of the top 5 decks, indie decks that I've acquired in 2025. But let's have a look at the cards. Gorgeous art style. This is what I love. There's no two ways around that. I know that there's other decks that have very similar art style. It does remind me very closely of the Cosmic Cycle tarot. But also it's very distinguishable because Jessica is never really... So she posted something about the evolution of her art style, and I totally get it. But at the same time, I'm still very familiar with her art style. Like, I can actually recognize it. And I like it. I really like what she's done. I love the colors, by the way. So many sunset cards in this deck. I really like it. So see the fire with the suit of arrows. She does also make it kind of easier. Or the cavern here with the hermit. So this is obviously a very specific deck. You will notice that there are no people in this deck, which is absolutely fair. And you will also notice that there are no animals in this deck, which is the moment in which I'm saying, and there's also no animals, and then there's an animal. And what animal is that, you ask? A spider. Of course, it's a spider. So not just a spider. Sorry, let me just do this. This is a redback, which is an Australian spider, and it's one of the 2 spiders that has a venom that is toxic enough that can actually kill a human being. Not only that, but it's very common in Sydney. It lives indoors. And do you want me to tell you everything? One of their favorite places to be is on doorknobs. I have already found in my 18 plus whatever years that I've lived in Australia, I've already found at least a dozen ratbacks. And if it sounds scary, it is because it is scary. However, I will have to say this, they are not aggressive at all. They are not, absolutely not aggressive at all. We do have other spiders that are incredibly aggressive, and you really have to defend yourself. When it comes to redbacks, it's a cohabitation. I know that it sounds horrible to say that, but it's true. They're tiny. They're actually not bigger than this, I would say. You know what? This is probably life size, I would say. They're kind of cute because they're really sleek black, and then they have this thunderbolt, really red thunderbolt on their back. Sometimes it's an orangey kind of red. And so they suffer the cold. The sunny winter, they just crawl inside. They knock at the door and they ask if they can come in. So yeah, I mean, I've seen so many. I know how to deal with them now. You just, because they don't, if you, for example, once I had to do it by myself because my husband wasn't there. So I took like a piece of it was a piece of paper, but it was resistant cardboard, let's say, and it was quite long, so an A4, imagine. So I went and I lifted up the spider, and it didn't crawl towards me. It was just literally a bit stunned and a bit scared, and it was just staying there, probably looking at me, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I slowly walked outside, and then I put it on one of my neighbor's plants. Yes, I am that terrible. They don't have children, so that's okay. Um, I didn't want it on one of my plants, okay, because I just don't want it anywhere near me. And also because, to my defense, my husband goes outside barefoot all the time. And so I didn't want him to just step on a redback and just die because he was stepping on a poisonous spider. So in any case, it doesn't have a lot of animals. I would say maybe that one is the only animal that we'll ever see. Of course, it had to be a spider. Of course. Oh dear. So, as a matter of fact, I was just thinking to ask you guys something en passant. If anyone has done any cognitive behavioral therapy with exposure, so exposure therapy linked to cognitive behavioral therapy for a phobia, like I have done for spiders, like I was gradually exposed in 4 years to a number of spiders because life wanted me to, not because it was my choice. And it actually worked for me because I find myself by myself many, many times. There's also a bee here, and or a bumblebee. It's more like a bumblebee, looks like. So I wonder, when you cease the exposure, when you stop being exposed to the element of your phobia, does it come back? Has anyone had any experience with that? Because what I'm afraid of right now is that I've been exposed for 4 years to huntsman spiders, which are as big as my hand. I'm not kidding. Look it up. Seriously, if you don't believe me, Google it. And I also have to say that their legs are so long that when they walk, or rather crawl, they look really grotesque, like really grotesque, borderline gross. So again, if you don't believe me, Google it. I've been exposed to them for 4 years, and I had to deal with that. One of them actually once crawled up my naked leg, and it was very soft. It was very soft touch. I was like, no, 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 no way in hell. But, I swatted it. But it wasn't painful at all. It wasn't, I don't know. But in any case, so after 4 years, then we moved area, and here there's only redbacks, but redbacks, they don't gross me out as much. I don't know why. Maybe because they're tiny, tiny. But I'm really worried because the other day I saw a white tail. So if you're not familiar with these types of spiders, there's different sizes. We have all kinds of spiders in Australia. All kinds of spiders. If people tell you, oh no, you don't see them, don't trust them. You see them everywhere. So white tails are not too big, like they're about this big, and they have a white, let's say, white mark on their abdomen in the back, and it looks like a tail. And I saw a white tail, and I had a really bad reaction. I was kind of sick. So I'm thinking to myself, is that because for the last 2 years I was not exposed to the big ass ones, the huntsmans, and my phobia has regressed? So if you've done cognitive behavioral therapy associated to exposure therapy, please let me know if you know of a regression when you stop being exposed to them. Okay, that was a side. It wasn't my fault. I was talking about there not being any animal in here, and of course there had to be a spider. So you know what, Jessica, your fault. In any case, this is a fantastic deck. I love it. I love working with it. It has the same vibes of the Spacious Tarot. in as much as having all of these natural landscape elements that really are very eloquent as well. So they do engage you in a conversation. But at the same time, this type of art style is my favorite, even more so than the spacious tarot. And when it comes to, let's say, the whole product itself, I believe that there's all of the elements that I really like. My favorite cardstock. The guidebook is amazing because it's visual. It's got a really beautiful matte kind of silver gilding of the edges here, as you can see. The backs are nice and reversible, just in case you need to reverse them. It fans out like a charm, but it also shuffles really well. It's very durable. Like you can tell this is one of those stacks that you can really beat up. You can use a number of times and it will not get damaged. So I love it. It's got the versatility of a mass market deck, but at the same time, the effort and the manifestation, you can really feel the intention of Jessica seeping through the artwork here. Loving the fact that there's so many sunset cards, but also the way in which some of these cards are represented. It's just really amazing. So as I said, this one is, I know that a lot of you would say it's very minimalist. Yes and no, because of course it has to be, it's a landscape-based tarot. So a consequence of that will be that you don't see people engaging their ordinary activities. But at the same time, it's more difficult to make a deck like this more effective or just as effective because you have a limited number of objects that you can use to display. And so you need to choose well. And it just does. I feel like it just does. It's look at the star. It's a comet. It's a falling star. It's just my favorite concept of the star. Of course, a falling star, shooting star is a magnificent concept. A concept that you can make a wish on a falling star. Isn't it just amazing? And of course, you can say whatever you want for wishes, but when you make a wish because you just saw a shooting star, a falling star, it's always about something cosmic, isn't it? I want to be happy. I want the love of my life to love me back. You don't wish for, I want to win the lottery. Or maybe some of us do, of course, but it's always something very passionate, something we really feel a lot for. So I really, really love this deck. I love the way it makes me feel when I look at the cards. Really love the way it reads. Perhaps because it is very focused on a few elements on the cards, it also gives you the possibility to understand how to talk about the card. For example, the hand one, which is an iceberg, obviously, and the theory of the iceberg is that the part that you see exposed to the surface, so above the surface of the sea, is just a smaller portion of what actually is the full size of the iceberg. So the part underneath the water is a lot bigger. So on the hang one, why do we look at the hang one this way? Why is an iceberg associated to that? Without even going to the guidebook, I'm already starting to think, because the sacrifice, well, first of all, is upside down. It kind of looks that way, but also in a more meaningful way, you think that the sacrifice is often not something that you notice. You don't necessarily know what people are going through, so you don't necessarily know the effort that they're putting on something, and you only see the result. Think about baking, for example. Baking to me is something, or cooking in general, is amazing because you really have to be an alchemist. You really have to know what you're doing when you're cooking, because you make one mistake and you can ruin everything. So you have to be extremely disciplined and extremely precise, but at the same time, you can be creative, which is amazing. And the end result, you just eat this thing and you think, oh, yeah, it's good, or yeah, it's amazing, but you don't see the preparation behind it. You don't see how long it took to prepare everything, to cook everything, to, let it rest, etc. So I love this idea of the sacrifice being the outcome of something that takes a long effort to make. And so the iceberg, this is what it makes me think about. So amazing deck, the tower with the volcano, the Ato cups, the bulk, the packing boxes. Obviously, there's a lot of swords, stones for the suit of earth, the Seven of Cups with all of these jars, and again, the alchemy of it all. You need to make yourself a tea, and you need to be careful. You don't want to make it a tea that, for example, if you need to calm down, you don't want to make it a tea that is going to excite you even more, and so on. Love, love, love this deck. Highly recommend it if it's still available. And it is by far my favorite indie deck of all of the 43 decks that I've acquired in 2025. What are your favorite indie decks from 2025? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you soon for another video.